Today's video is on the top 5 weirdest shoes ever made.
Number 5. Cab-cabs. Functioning as many stilt shoes, cab-cabs, otherwise known as nalins, were accessories that would allow two shapely pillars to glide across the mud and dirt of Middle Eastern bathhouses with ease. The shoes were often used by royalty and were extremely expensive, though there were some made for common use. Some cab-cabs were doused in gold or pearls, or made of the finest metals in the land. This was an odd choice, considering that their purpose was to allow the royal family not to get human waste on their feet as they trotted into public areas. Cab-cabs got their name from the sound they make when they are walking on the marble floors. They quickly fell out of favor in the bathroom scene and were instead worn by common women in weddings, though the practice was discontinued after some men believed taller women emasculated their own appearance. Number 4. Heelless boots. In 2007, heelless shoes made their mainstream debut, much to the confusion of everyone who saw them. While the original designer claimed that there was no medical consequence for wearing the shoes, or that they would cause no discomfort to the wearer, many doctors proved otherwise, saying that wearing heelless shoes for extended periods of time could actually warp one's feet or even misalign the spinal cord. While heelless shoes had their moment in the spotlight, especially after Victoria Beckham was spotted sporting them in 2008, they eventually dwindled away due to their painful nature and outright absurd design. Though many fashion aficionados claim that the accessories were never planned to start a trend anyway, and that they were used just to get media attention for their creator, British-Italian designer Antonio Berardi, these uncomfortable shoes cost $7,260. But far more costly would be the traumatic injury they could cause. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe to our channel with notifications on. Number 3. Gun hoof shoes. When you combine designing shoes with taxidermy, you get some interesting and a bit controversial creations. Iris Scheiferstein, an artist and fashion taxidermist from Berlin, Germany, is the creator of these unusual shoes, which she appropriately named gun hoof shoes. Gun hoof shoes, like every other creation of Iris Scheiferstein, are the result of a rather gruesome process. At first, Scheiferstein was picking up deceased animals on the street and almost went to prison for it, because deceased animals are protected by German law. Now, she gets the carcasses from her local butcher. Iris Scheiferstein admits that the ugliest part of her work is removing the meat from the carcasses. After she is finished with that, she sends the skin to a tanner for preservation. The next part of the process is sculpting the shoes around a shoe model before stitching lining and insoles. Scheiferstein was inspired by horses. She explained that she wanted to recreate the beautiful walk of the horses with this footwear. The only problem is that gun hoof shoes become extremely uncomfortable after some time. Unsurprisingly, Lady Gaga is a huge fan of these shoes that cost a whopping $5,000. Number 2. Chinese Lotus shoes. These accessories, now famous more for their usage in binding and morphing the feet of women in ancient China, have a long history and can still be found in some parts of the country, even though they are now publicly shamed. In the old days, small feet were considered a highly attractive feature. So in order to ensure that a woman would keep small feet for the rest of her life, she was often forced to wear these tiny curved Chinese lotus shoes, which would eventually deform the growth process and keep her feet in a relatively small size. There were standards of what was considered to be a perfectly bound foot. The most desired foot size was known as a golden lotus, which would have been 3 inches long. After that, there is the silver lotus, which would have been at 4 inches, and that was considered respectable. Any foot that was 5 inches or longer was to be an iron lotus. Foot binding was not done for personal satisfaction, but rather it was done in order for women to be considered for marriage. This is the reason why it mattered as to what type of lotus a girl had, because if she had an iron lotus, she would have very low chances of marriage. While there were some women whose feet were never bound, those women were looked down on by society. Despite the pain, millions of Chinese women stuck to the tradition. The practice has mostly been abandoned in contemporary society, but there are still women alive who practice this form of foot binding at a young age. Because of this, they have incredible difficulty walking and getting around, making this fashion story less about a strange and popular trend and more about inhumane suffering due to an unrealistic beauty standard. Number 1. Armadillo Boots by Alexander McQueen. Alexander McQueen developed this 30-centimeter high armadillo boot in 2010 as a part of the wider collection inspired by Plato's Atlantis. This base of this weird-looking boot was completely carved from wood, while the upper part took the form of a high-heeled shoe. The boot was secured with 4 custom-length zippers, 2 of which were placed on the inner lining, and 2 with the outer body of the shoe, and in some cases there was an additional ankle cuff. When Alexander McQueen's armadillo boots walked the runway for his Spring/Summer 2010 show, they became one of the most talked about shoes in fashion, appearing most famously on Lady Gaga in both her Bad Romance video and on the 2010 MTV VMA's red carpet. But even though Lady Gaga wore them, she didn't actually own them until 2015. When she revealed on her Instagram that she is now the new owner of 3 pairs of the boots auctioned off by Christie's to raise money for UNICEF's relief effort in Nepal, and fetching a whopping $295,000 in total. Gaga posted the photos on Instagram, trying on one pair she calls a gift from heaven, another cradling the footwear writing, "Long live the Queen," and demonstrating how she plans to take care of the boots, storing them under a glass dome so they can live protected and happy. The high platform curved shoe is notorious for being unbearably uncomfortable, with multiple critics claiming that it is more effective as a torture device than it is as a fashion item. Still, the shoes went on to massive sales after Lady Gaga was seen wearing them. But they unsurprisingly dropped off in popularity just a few weeks later. But that doesn't change the fact that Alexander McQueen created an entirely new shoe form with his armadillo boot that still remains one of the most iconic pieces of design he has ever created. As such, Alexander McQueen's armadillo boot earns a top spot on our list of 5 weirdest shoes ever made. Now let's take a look at some honorable mentions. Skin heels. These weird-looking shoes, appropriately named skin heels, definitely look like they would be an absolute hit during the Halloween season. The surprising thing about skin heels is that they actually began as a Photoshop prank. They were even featured in Vogue magazine. It was then when Montreal-based fashion duo Hannah Rose Dalton and Stephen Niraj Bhaskaran, the owners of an Instagram account called Fecal Matter, decided to turn digitally altered shoes into reality. The shoes, which are made with prosthetics and silicone, are even tailor-fit with lifelike dimples, moles, and even prosthetic hair. The goal was to make them look as realistic as possible. Skin heels are actually quite expensive, with the beginning price of a whopping $10,000. The creators described these shoes as a sort of wearable art, which is part of the reason why they are not that accessible in terms of the price. According to the creators, the intention of this unique design was to get people to question what it means to be human, to see different possibilities, and have no fear in who they want to be. The Skullheeled Shoes. The Skullheeled Shoes were created by Filipino fashion designer Kermit Tesoro. The heel portion of the shoe is meticulously carved into the shape of a skull, while the part that holds a foot is a towering block of arched wood, carved and covered with an upper suede finish. The actual name of this rather unusual shoe design is called the Seat of Intelligence. When asked about the message he was trying to send with these shoes, Kermit Tesoro explained that he designed them as a mockery of people who used fashion as a way to impress and not as a form of expression. The Skullheeled shoes also attracted the attention of Lady Gaga. It's not a secret to anyone that the pop superstar loves all things fashionable, risque, and different, as we've seen her in many outfits. So the fact that the Skullheeled shoes managed to catch her eye isn't surprising at all. Thanks to Lady Gaga, the Skullheeled shoe design quickly went viral.
I hope you all enjoyed today's video, narrated by Zach this time. Be sure to subscribe for more and check out some of our recent uploads.